Well, while I'm stuck here in the house and not been able to go out and dig, I thought maybe I would do a little review on some of the collections that I have, the bottles that I acquire over the years, and the inks are an interesting group of bottles. I have numerous amounts of them. I have a lot of ink bottles. These are just a few small inks. These would be everyday. These aren't the master inks. These are just ones that would be sitting in desks or school desks or on somebody's table and used, and then a lot of times thrown away. I also have a mucilage or two in there. Let's start out with some bottles that people might be interested or know about. I gotta find some interesting ones. Here's one, David's ink. These were a big manufacturing out of New York, New Rochelle or Rochester. No, New Rochelle. It was in New York, 5 boroughs area. This man who started the ink company, from what I remember, he started it in about 1830, and I think 1920s is where this company ends up going off the radar. Not much that I know about them, except that they had a lot of problems. They went in and out of business for years. There was bankruptcies, there was embezzlement, there were 3 brothers. Well, actually, there was more than 3 brothers. And this company was in and out of business for years. This one is a 1870s version of it. They go back way back to the 1830s. This is Mark Davis' ink in some of the labels still there. The dump I dug this in was pretty good. Cause is another guy. Cause ink is well known for, well, he's invented the fountain pen, actually, from what I gather. That was his main thing, and inks was one of the other. He started the Cause ink. His name was Francis Brown, and he started it probably around, I would say, 1886. He bought out another ink company. The name Cause really is weird, because what he did was, while he was working for this other company, he was so impressed with the deep black hue of the ink that it reminded him of a crow. When he finally took over the company, he changed the name to Cause, as the sound of a crow makes. So the symbol was always a crow on a ink bottle. So that is where that name comes from. And apparently he was in business until about the 1920s, and the ink and the pens were still in business way into the 30s, from what I gather. Here's one that you'll come up with a lot, is Diamond. Diamond was founded by August Rett, a German, in Rochester, New York, back in the 1875. Well, a little before that, 1860s, 68 or 66. But he moved to Milwaukee in 1875, and the company took off from there. It stayed in business until pretty much the 1930s. So there's a machine-made version of a Diamond ink bottle. Pretty plain, but they made a lot of these different bottles, so you could easily find them. Let's see get into some color. Here's a green Carter's, real old. The top was broken off or ground off. It didn't. I took it because it's so dark green, and although the top is missing, this is the 1870s version. We'll go to the penny ink. The English penny inks are very common. You find them all in 1880s and 1890s. These were also called traveler's inks. You know, you put them in your saddlebag, and they did pretty well in there. Very durable, and it's just hard to find when you were empty or not. Blue is a common color used by ink companies. When you think of an ink bottle, you think of this cobalt blue. This cone is almost reminds me of a mucilage more than an ink bottle, but it's hard to tell the two apart. It's in some points. This is definitely mucilage. These sheared lips with nothing on them generally indicated that, you know, it had a stopper with a little brush on it, and that was a glue. Mucilage is also another word for it. Sanford's. Sanford, this company had pretty big problems really back in the day. It was a Chicago in 1858, but a guy called Frederick I can't remember his name. He went into business with William Sanford, the founder, in 1866. Ringwood, or whatever his name was. Well, he went into business, and he's actually the guy who moved the company to Chicago. What's weird about Sanford, is William died in 1866 of Bright's disease. He was only like 30 when he died. I do not believe that he went to Chicago with his partner. I think his partner decided to move because of a better financial situation, but he kept the name, and also a few brothers of that company, of the Sanfords, came into the business later on. But William Sanford was the founder, but Frederick Ringwood was really the guy who started it off and running. This is just a barrel ink. This is a version. This is a machine-made version of a barrel, as you can see. This is a older version, and this patent is 1895. You can see it's a ring. But if you really want to see the standard for inks in the early days, you'd have to go to this 8-paneled rolled lip pontiled ink, which were pretty common in the 1850s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. You can see this one has an open pontil. It's a rolled lip, and it's just blown out. Who knows who made it? Could have been anybody in those days. Here's a square, another probably 1860s, 70s. And we'll go back to this mucilage here. Good old Sanford's free sample. This is a free sample, ground lip, so we know it's 1880s at least, and it was a little free sample of their glue. Oh, now, what's the difference between an ink bottle, an ink well, and an ink dispenser? Well, not much. These are ink wells. These were, this probably had a cap on it, a metal cap or a rubber cap on it with the hole in it. It would have stuck in here. The cap would have opened up. There would have been a hole in this. And then you could have gotten into the reservoir. And this sat on a desk. This was permanent. These were not. These were sitting there on somebody's desk. Once they were empty, unless they were filled by a master ink, they were pretty much useless. This here is another form of inkwell. You can see this is one of those non-spillable kind. You know, it had a divot in there so that the ink would not be poured out accidentally. This is also an ink well. Here's a cool bottle. I don't know. Oh, what is interesting about this? It says property of the USP department, and this was, of course, U.S. Post Office. It's a barrel ink. It might have sat in a desk. It could have been very common. U.S. Post Office. This is a pretty cool bottle. When I found it, I didn't know what the P stood for, and then it hit me like a light. Yeah, we have that one. I already showed you that. Here's another cone. It's probably similar to a Carter's. Carter's made tons of these, and I have a few more with the Carter name on that. So you can see there's a standard cone. There's also, here is one with a double neck, a double ring lip. All these pretty much run within the 1870s, if we're looking at this one, 1860s, 70s, all the way up until the 1930s. Believe it or not, this bottle probably goes back to the 1920s at least. And I would say this one could easily go back to the 1930s. These were still being produced back then in pretty big quantities. It wasn't until the mid-30s that they got rid of this style lip and put on the screw caps, and then from on there they don't really garner much interest to me. After they developed the screw cap with the ink bottles, that was it. So all these are just a small example of what I have, but they give you a good overview of basically what you'll find if you're digging in a dump and it has some age to it. I like older ink bottles. The newer ones, well, they're interesting. Like I said, this one here, this has a similar lip to this one, although there's probably the difference between this bottle and this bottle is probably, I'd say easily 30 years, so if not 40. But they're similar in shape. This one's probably produced in the 1920s, I'm pretty sure, or at least the 1910s or 15s. You know, it's hard to date these after machine made because though they didn't change, you know, the process was changed in the way they made them. The styles really didn't switch over till later on. You'll hear all kinds of stories about who started the square inks and all that, but squares have been around a long time, like this 1870s. There you have it. A little tutorial just to keep you in tune. I'll try to do a few more of these and see if you're interested. Just give me a comment on them, and have any interesting inks and other names, let me know. David's, and Hoffman is another one. That one is a cool bottle, but didn't find much information on it. It's a barrel ink, and all I know is I think it's, I don't know, out of the Midwest maybe. Don't know. That's it. Take care.